Hello, Flagler County. Welcome to my home again, and to my temporary headquarters. Jerry O'Gara, Republican candidate for Flagler Sheriff. I've been a candidate since April 2015. It's almost a year now. Thanks for taking the time to view the video. It's now February 2016, and campaign season is in full swing. I think I've been campaigning longer than some of the candidates that have lived here. Some might not even live here at all. First, let me say this is my first campaign. Politics change people and relationships. It's a shame. It's not easy. I'll tell you that much. This election is going to be about 1, an ethical sheriff, and 2, who could manage the Flagler County Sheriff's Office best. There are obviously some who fly off the unethical chart and some who have good, honorable records. Those who don't have good records will focus on their career highlights and pretend the bad stuff never happened and never will bring it up voluntarily. That will be my job. It's all going to come down to who is the best manager. And that scares some of my opponents and their handlers. My opponents have no idea about my managerial history or the complexities of Rikers Island and how it dwarfs any managerial experience, if any they may have had or have. So they have to focus on basically 2 issues they think they can use against me. I'll start by repeating a quote I heard recently that I think is very fitting. They will supplant the illusion of knowledge where none exists. The first issue of their focus is that I'm not from Florida. Apparently, these Floridian-born geniuses running for sheriff haven't figured out that 70% of everyone in Florida relocated to Florida. The figure's probably higher in Flagler, and probably insulted and alienated most of you watching this video. So some of my candidates have softened up this harsh narrative to simply imply, I'm from Florida, inferring I'm not from that other place, using the us versus them approach. I'll talk more about that later. Regardless, it's a very divisive approach when you should be convincing people you can be sheriff to all residents. You know, I get the whole New Yorker, New Jersey mistrust thing. I do. It's hard to ignore when the last couple of sheriff's behavior gets associated with this sort of stereotype. But I assure you, we're all not like that. In a place like New York, a Democrat stronghold for decades, you can't get a Republican mayor and a Republican governor elected twice without millions of good conservative New Yorkers to get it done. So the second narrative, and most disturbing narrative, being promoted by candidates and their handlers, all of which who were or currently are cops, and once again supplanting the illusion of knowledge where none exists. And that's that you have to be or should be a cop to be a sheriff or some version of that. Statements like these are regurgitated by a minuscule minority of divisive cops. We all know they exist, and they bring a lot of undue attention to the millions of great cops. Some are unaware they are doing this, and some absolutely know exactly what they're doing. They truly think cops are smarter than everybody else. There's no convincing them otherwise. Be careful of this stereotype and the beliefs in the us versus them mentality I mentioned earlier. It's a very destructive and divisive mentality, and many of the candidates who are personally espousing this negative narrative have also surrounded themselves with lawmen supporters of like mind. The intent is to mislead you about the law to their advantage. Not a good start, and if being disingenuous as a candidate now is acceptable to them, God forbid if they acquire the power and position to live it out for 4 years. Okay? First and foremost, the law. Florida law doesn't require a sheriff to be a cop. For the same reason the President of the United States doesn't have to be a general. It's a constitutional office. It prevents police states and dictatorships. Thank God this has been maintained in Florida. The people have the input who they want to be their sheriff and not have to rely on a mayor or county commissioner's choice. Men and women much smarter than my opponents wrote these laws. They wanted to ensure civilians will be able to control those with authority and power. It's a great law. A quicker way of explaining my position is to think of the most successful president in our life. Right. A Hollywood actor. Got it. Also, their premise is really self-defeating and quite humorous. Using their idea that one must be a cop to be a sheriff, well then I'm going to submit that one must be a CO, a correction officer, to be a sheriff. After all, the detention facility is a large portion of the operation in Flagler and getting bigger every day. America's toughest sheriff, Joe Arpaio, is famous for his jail operations, not his cop operations. I think Joe was a cop for 6 months. But of course, both positions are absurd. Sheriff is a managerial position. The best boss in New York City Department of Correction was from the probation department, not from the same department. He was a great manager. He gave the uniformed staff the support to do their jobs while he managed, the same way Jack Welch of GE never repaired a refrigerator, but he gave his employees the tools and support to make GE a Fortune 500 company. This is how I will manage. I thought another interesting stab at misleading you was when my opponent's handlers said, "Aren't we tired of having sheriffs who aren't Florida certified law enforcement officers?" Who even makes it a point to know that? No one. You know why? Once again, the illusion of knowledge where none actually exists. The reason all sheriffs have a general counsel, a lawyer assigned to their office, is to be available for issues of the law that may be unclear to the sheriff, the undersheriff, or anyone else in the agency. Also, inferring how one would handle being assaulted in New York or Florida is not equally horrific, or that there is a Florida way or a New York way to address these issues, is more ridiculous assertions from the us versus them disingenuous opponents. We had cops as sheriffs before. They don't work out well either all the time. That's why Manfre's in office today. The guy before Manfre was a cop. Bottom line, there is no empirical evidence that shows sheriff office run by a career cop is more efficient or effective. Period. Like I said before, this campaign should be about the sheriff being a manager, not about the sheriff being a cop. So feel confident telling your friends the sheriff doesn't have to be a cop, by law, or practicality. I will talk on another video about the pitfalls of sheriff candidates who are cops rather than being what they are paid to do, be a manager. I think this is very important. Please keep this in mind if you relocated to Florida or are not a cop or were never a cop. You can expect selective enforcement of the law from a sheriff and his staff who believe either of these two things to be true. This is just more of the embedded division culture which exists, and I want to end in Flagler. I'm not a stranger to Flagler. I have a history of dedication, volunteering, residing, and paying taxes in Flagler. As a proud New York peace officer with the powers of arrest, I successfully managed and enforced the law on Rikers Island, a city within a city, for 20 years with honor. I understand the hardships, difficulties, and dangers of law enforcement. I lived it for 20 years. But have also been on the short end of the treatment by this unacceptable minority of us versus them opponents in my capacity as a DOC employee and a citizen. My family has a history since 1928 until this very day of law enforcement. I have nothing but admiration for those that perform their duties with honor in the criminal justice system. It pains me to see them do this, especially for their own benefit and not yours. I also understand that we are all human and fallible at times, and poor behavior and improper thought can and must be changed. I believe I have the right mindset to ensure equal and just application of the law, regardless of birthplace, career choices, religion, sex, political opinions, or how you elect to exhibit your liberties and freedoms in your private lives. I need your vote to fix all that is broken in this agency, so we can concentrate on our homes, our families, and our friends. It seems every day I wake up, I have to hear or read or see a picture, problem, or complaint about this sheriff. And if the retired undersheriff gets in, he will make the current sheriff look like a recluse. If you can imagine that atrocity. Thanks for listening. Please go to my website at og4sheriff.com or my Facebook page, Jerry O'Gara. God bless you. God bless Flagler. Please be safe. Thanks again.